On today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Flip and Steele, we are doing a fantasy forecast looking at some of the top young goalies in the game, 23 years of age or under, and of course, a deep look into Thursday's juicy 10-game DFS and big-time bets board.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, hockey heads? Welcome back to your favorite and hottest podcast. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Steele Roden and Big Flip Livingstone. We are here for episode number 36 of the reboot of this show. Thank you so much for subscribing, liking, and following. Please continue to show us that love and support. Steele and I appreciate it every single day and every episode. You know where to find us Monday to Friday across all platforms you find your favorite content. And thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. Steele, my brother, on today's episode, 10-game betting and DFS board. You know we're getting weird with that. We have some picks, locks, and fantasy targets. But I think we know what we want to feed the people today on this show, Steele. We're taking a look at goalies. We're taking a look at goalies 23 or under that could change the fantasy game. And guys that you got to have your eye on, I would say, Steele, from now until the end of the season. And most definitely when draft time comes around in September and October to really solidify your goaltending roster.
Hey, goalies are a hot topic right now in fantasy leagues, and look at all of the young studs in the crease right now across the entire NHL. So a lot of young goalies to talk about. You know, they're going to be taking over in the next couple of years with, you know, sort of the end of an era coming, you know, with a lot of players getting up there in age right now. So the goalies, a lot of these young goalies you're going to need to keep an eye out for them. Moving forward in the next couple of years, they're definitely going to jump off the page and get drafted a little bit higher than regular because of the way they're playing. And of course, you got to take their team into account where they're playing right now. But Flip, a lot of young guys that we got to talk about. First one for me is a guy on a struggling team, Carter Hart of the Philadelphia Flyers. I think for the most part, all of us can agree that it's been a really disappointing couple of years for Carter Hart as well as the Philadelphia Flyers organization. He's only owned at 65% on Yahoo and 60% on ESPN fantasy leagues. You know, a couple of years ago, that would have been up to 85, even 90% with the way he was playing. But it's a little bit shocking how bad they've been. He's got 11-19-7 record so far this year, a 9-11 save percentage with a 297 goals against average, which is a lot better than, you know, the season before this one, where he had a 3.67 goals against average and an 877 save percentage. So he's clearly playing better this year. But again, very shocking the way Philadelphia has put up this year.
I think we're talking about a guy, Steele, you know, 23 years and under. You can't not talk about Carter Hart. The talent is there. The ceiling is very high. You mentioned the issues with his consistency, but also can we be very honest and straightforward about what happens to goalies in Philadelphia? It's a goalie graveyard. They go there to have their careers either ended or derailed. And unfortunately, Carter Hart has the unfortunate circumstance of playing behind a very weak blue line, back-to-back years, giving up too many shots. And he is a young goalie with lots to develop. And those are the points I'm going to make with my two guys is that's the exciting part with these players. And like we said, from a fantasy side of things, you can't sleep on these guys because the ceiling is just so high, Steele. Carter Hart still has a lot of fantasy value. And despite those numbers, I still would have expected him to be owned at a higher percentage, much like the two guys that I'm going to talk about as well.
Yeah, and just before you get into your first guy here, real quickly, the Philadelphia Flyers are the worst team offensively as well. Like, so you mentioned that they have one of the worst blue lines. They also have not scored a ton of goals. They're in last place in the league right now for goals for at 148, behind Arizona, behind Montreal, behind Seattle. So that just speaks at how bad they've been this year.
It's true.
And remember, they've gone on 2 10-game losing streaks in this season so far. So it's been very, very bad. All of the blame cannot be put on Carter Hart. He needs to get better. He's going to develop a little bit more. That's why we're saying That's why we're, pointing him out right now. In the next couple of years, he should be up there. He's still a young goalie, but the team has not helped him whatsoever.
Not helped him at all, and I'll leave it at this with Carter Hart. I have Carter Hart in a couple of different platforms for fantasy. I am not giving up on him yet. He will be another keeper of mine in both of my dynasty leagues this year. It's already confirmed, and that's just the nature of the goalie roster for fantasy, right? There are not many great options for – he's a number one goalie, right? And he's going to continue to get that number one opportunity. You would at least think he gets another full season of a look at number one. And another guy who's going to get probably a few full seasons as a look at number one is Jake Ottinger in Dallas. Yeah. You just watched him live the other night in Toronto against the Leafs. Sure, he allowed 4 goals. They lost. He's not on a great streak right now. I believe that's a 3-game losing streak for Ottinger. It is. But other than that, he's been very solid this season for the Dallas Stars. And I'll say this about Ottinger. The ceiling is high and he continues to improve. And a goalie like this, he's cerebral in his net steal, very confident, and he's 6'5". 12, 9, and 1 this season with a 245 goals against and 919 save percentage. Those are good numbers on not a great Dallas team. I'll say this, though. He's owned at 55% in ESPN leagues. He's been a top 15, top 20 option all season. Yeah. What's going on in Dallas in the depth chart in that net? There's not much there. This is his crease for the next, at least for the foreseeable future. Anton Khudobin is dealing now with a major injury to, he's undergone surgery. He's out. Yeah. So we know at least the rest of this season, Ottinger is definitely worth a look. And I think, I mentioned Dynasty at 23 years old, 6'5", calm demeanor, all this thing. He's a must watch fantasy prospect in the cage at 23 years old still.
Hey, at the beginning of the season, we were talking about their goalie situation because they had Braden Holtby, they had Anton Khudobin, and they had this young guy, Jake Ottinger, as well. Halfway through the season, it was pretty much very clear who was going to be taking the reins in the crease, and that was Jake Ottinger. Braden Holtby, his name was tossed around the trade block, as well as Anton Khudobin's earlier on in the season. And especially with Khudobin undergoing surgery, I think Holtby's going to be, the backup for now. His name's probably going to get taken off the trade block. But Jake Ottinger, this is his crease. I was at that game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yeah, he let 4 goals in, but again, the Toronto Maple Leafs had like 40 shots in that game, and a couple of those goals, like the second one off Tavares, it went off his foot in the front of the net. Yep. The third one, they were on the PK. Morgan Riley just skated right in and dropped it to Andre Cachet. So the goals weren't his fault. I thought he played a really, really good game.
Me too.
But in the 3 losses that he's had, the last 3, it hasn't really been his fault.
I appreciate that support, good sir. And I actually, was highlighting it for the same reason. So I think, please do not sleep on a guy like Jake Ottinger. I love this kid's game. And Steele, if you want, I can hit you with my second guy real quick. Or maybe, actually, you know what? Hold the phone on that because I just want to talk about BetOnline real quick, Steele. We got to pay the bills. And it's that time of year again, baby. March Madness is here. Also, shout out St. Paddy's Day. It is a big day. Tournament basketball is back. For all the odds, contests, and player props, betonline.net is your #1 source for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season, and it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Cha-ching. Head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and all the action. BetOnline, it's where the game starts.
Thanks for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. Make sure you tune in on Monday, March 21st, 3:30 Eastern Time for our live trade deadline reaction show to get all the on-ice fantasy and betting analysis you will ever need from myself and Big Flip Livingstone over there, with appearances from our roster of local team experts. You don't want to miss out. There's going to be a ton of trades rolling into the weekend and rolling into Monday before the trade deadline. So make sure you're keeping your eyes peeled for our show on Monday, March 21st. Thank you so much for supporting Flip and I on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We appreciate all the love and support out there. Before we get into our DFS selections, we do have a couple of other goalies we want to quickly talk about.
Yes, sir.
And I'll get right into my guy right here, Spencer Knight of the Florida Panthers, 20 years old, owned at 40% in Yahoo and 44% on ESPN leagues. I think that's a little bit high right now, based off the way that Sergei Bobrovsky's playing and, Knight not getting a ton of starts. But again, he's been pretty rock solid. 214 fantasy points on the season, 11-6-3 record with a 905 save percentage and a 297 goals against average. Yeah. I think his numbers, don't really speak for how well he can play. The record itself, like he's got a good record, but again, a lot of those games were very high scoring games, and we know Florida can score a ton offensively. So even when he's let in 4 or 5 goals in, they still won those games because offensively, the Florida Panthers are a juggernaut. And I think a lot of people really expected him to take over the crease this year because of how bad Bobrovsky has played over the last couple of seasons. But Bobrovsky just came in the crease and he's like, not time yet. This is still my area. This is my crease. And you're not taking the starting position away from me. In the next couple of years, he probably will. Bobrovsky's 33 years old. I don't think it will happen next year, but in the next couple of years, Spencer Knight will probably be the starting goaltender for the Florida Panthers. I think he's that good.
I agree. And I think after what we saw from him last season, I don't think that was a flash in the pan. I think that was more of an indication of things to come than a one-off. I also think what you just said about Bobrovsky getting up there in age is something that you can't ignore. A goalie that's also played a lot of hockey over his career, right? We talked about the mileage on that body. But I'll say this about Spencer Knight, and I think one of the reasons why he doesn't get as much credit as he should is because he's a goalie that came from the NCAA ranks, and there's not a ton of track record there with elite goalies anyway. But I don't think that should be a knock against Spencer Knight, but that's maybe one of the reasons he doesn't get the love he deserves, because I think also at 20, Steele, youngest guy on the topic of what we're talking about today, obviously the most attractive from a longevity standpoint. So when it comes to fantasy, and I keep saying dynasty, that's when age really matters, right? You want to be investing in these guys. Keep your eye out for the future, especially for goalies. And I'll leave it at this. I talked about Jeremy Swayman yesterday. I'll quickly mention it again. 4th in the league in save percentage this year, tied for the best goals against at 2.06. 17 wins, 7 losses, 3 overtime losses. This kid has been sensational of late, Steele. I believe, actually, no, that is correct. He did not lose in a month. 9-0-1 in regular, you know what I mean? Did not lose in regulation for a whole month. So at 23 years old, you cannot ignore the talent that Sweyman has already displayed. And I'll leave it at this. The Boston front office clearly believes in this kid, and they have a good track record for goaltenders. They passed on Dan Vladar and traded him away last summer as a nice insurance piece, more confident in Sweyman. Also, Linus Ulmark, another good option, more confidence in Sweyman. That's saying a lot. They put a lot of stock in this kid, and I think you have to keep an eye on him. 23 years old, owned in 55% of ESPN leagues. That number is going to go way up over the next couple of seasons.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't pick him for DFS selections on Thursday, but Jake Ottinger's available. He's out there. He's playing the Montreal Canadiens, and a couple of the other young studs might be in the crease as well for Thursday. Let's jump over to the DFS selections. 10-game board, like you mentioned off the top. A lot of juicy matchups.
Lots.
My first game that I'm looking at, the Nashville Predators versus the Philadelphia Flyers. We were just talking about Carter Hart. We don't know yet if he will be the starting goalie, which he might be. But again, Martin Jones being the backup and whatnot, he could get the start as well. But I'm going with the players from the Nashville Predators. We haven't shown a ton of love to the Preds so far this season. But Ryan Johansson, Matt Duchene, and Roman Yossi are my targets for this DFS night.
I love this.
Johansson, he's got 4 points in his last 4 games. Matt Duchene is riding a 7-game point streak, 8 goals and 14 points in that time. 4 out of the 7 of those games, he had multi-goal games as well. So this guy's absolutely lighting the lamps, putting the puck in the back of the net. And Roman Yossi is leading the defenseman in the NHL with points so far in the season, I believe. So everything is just trending upwards for the Nashville Predators right now, especially how close and everything is in the Western Conference with the wild card race, playoff spots becoming an issue right now. It's getting crazy in the Western Conference. These are big points on the board right now, especially going up against probably the worst team in the NHL right now. The Nashville Predators, I'm taking their big three guys, Roman Yossi, Ryan Johansson, Matt Duchene. Duchene and Yossi, they're probably going to be upwards of $7,000, while Johansson around $5,500. But you got to take him. The price is absolutely worth it.
I think I am never loved something that you have said on this show more than what you have just said, because right at the top of my notes for DFS targets is the Nashville Predators. I'm not kidding. Actually, my number one target, and it's going to feed right into my bets as it always does, is we need to talk about Roman Yossi for a quick second, because if it hasn't been for the insane season from Cale Makar, this is his Norris Trophy is already on the mantelpiece. He is having a sensational year, Steele. And I'll say this. You mentioned, was it Duchene on a streak? Yeah. Yossi on a 7-game point streak as well. How about 3 goals and 13 assists over his last 7 games? And just over the last 4 games, Steele, 7 assists from Yossi. He has been sensational. And like I said, aside from Cale Makar, this guy has been far and away the best blue liner. And I think going up against the Philadelphia Flyers, also let's note, Nashville is scoring at will right now. They are clicking. So I think this is a very juicy spot. But the last thing I wanted to say about it is it's Claude Giroux's 1,000th game, and it is at home. I hate those weird emotional angles. I don't think it's going to really matter here, but I just had to say it.
Hey, that usually ends up, we've seen it a lot, not in just the NHL, but across other, the top 4 sports leagues. When it comes to like one of those, recognizing someone for like 1,000 games, or like they were retired last season, it usually doesn't pan out in their favor, and they usually end up getting smoked. I hope so. I hope it might happen. I hope so. The Nashville Predators, you got to go with the Predators against the Philadelphia Flyers. Yes, we already talked about the struggles on the blue line, the struggles offensively, as well as the struggles in pretty much the entire team is just struggling. So you got to go with the Nashville Predators. The second matchup I'm looking at, and I don't know if you'll like my angle here, but it's the Pittsburgh Penguins versus the St. Louis Blues. I'm going with the St. Louis Blues second lineup, their second line. They are at home for this game. I'm going with Vladimir Tarasenko, Braden Shen, who's jumped up from the third line because Robert Thomas is out with illness, and Colton Pereiko, who you've mentioned a couple of times as well. Tarasenko has 6 points in his last 4 games. Shen has 5 points in his last 4 games. Colton Pereiko, we've talked about it. He's not an offensive juggernaut. He can chip in here and there, but you're going to get the points from the blocked shots, the hits, the shots on net, and the occasional time when he can jump up into the plays and get a couple of apples. So I'm spending most of my money in that Nashville Predators game because Roman Yossi is going to be a very expensive guy. But like Flip mentioned, he's on the 7-game point streak. So you've got to go with a little bit of a cheaper option. Colton Pereiko, I think, can bring a lot of value. And then Shen and Tarasenko won't be as expensive as guys like Duchene and Johansson as well. So in that $5,500 range for Tarasenko and Shen, and you're going to be moving forward in a big night DFS way.
I like it, Steele. I like it a lot. And at the end of the day here, I think what's important and what we say all the time, ride those hot hands. If you have to spend the money on those guys like we just mentioned, how hot are they? You're going to get your money's worth here, and you have to go that way. Augment your roster with some cheaper options, like you said. And a guy like Colton Pereiko, sure, he's not going to jump off the page with a multi-point night every single night, but he chips in with shots, blocks, hits, occasional penalty minutes, and definitely here or there with an assist or a big-time goal. Gets power play time as well. So those are guys like, yes, of course, not in the same caliber as Roman Yossi, but still a very effective NHL player and one who can be effective for your DFS squad at a good price.
Yeah, and for goalie options, I'm looking towards that Toronto Maple Leaf versus the Carolina Hurricanes game. Frederick Anderson is probably the way to go. You might have to shift some of your money around. You might not be able to take some of the players that we just mentioned if you go after Frederick Anderson. He probably will be the top goalie that night. Maybe Igor Shesterkin or Tristan Jarry because they're both in matchups as well. But I got to go with Frederick Anderson. Austin Matthews is out of the lineup. The Carolina Hurricanes are a way better team than the Dallas Stars. So going into this matchup, I think that Frederick Anderson is the play to go for your goalie.
I am going to leave all the statistics for the bet segment coming up in a couple of seconds.
Okay.
100% Steele. I back that decision, and I can explain it to you in a second if you'd like. Do you have any other DFS picks, good sir, or should we roll right into my favorite segment of the show?
We should roll right into your favorite segment of the show. But before we get to that, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. Make sure you follow and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate all the support and all the love out there. So thank you so much for that. Let's get into big time bets, Flip. 10 games on the schedule for Thursday night. What is your first pick?
First pick, let's go right to it. Carolina Hurricanes at the Toronto Maple Leafs. You just talked about a couple of things that I think have to factor in here. Big emotional win for the Leafs on Tuesday night. We talked about it a little bit. You know, Eric Kallgren, big NHL debut. I think he had 42 stops or something like that.
Yeah.
42 save performance, right and around there. Big win for the Leafs. I talked about this next stretch being pivotal for them, definitely while Matthews is out for 2. He's still out for 1 game, and I'll say this. Carolina Hurricanes ain't no Dallas Stars.
Yeah.
They're rolling in here having won 9 of their last 12 and 4 of their last 5. Despite getting beat by the Pittsburgh Penguins last time out, a very good Pittsburgh Penguins team, this Carolina unit has been rolling. And I love this spot for Freddie Anderson, who let one slip away in his first return back to Toronto earlier in the season. It was a 4-3 overtime win for Toronto. You know this means a lot for Freddie coming back to a team that basically not gave up on him, but decided to go with another option. Frederick Anderson, I think, is a target for DFS, and I love the Hurricanes in this spot. We know the Leafs have been up and down. Yes, that was a good win, but that was the Dallas Stars, and in come a hungry Hurricanes team who, trust me, remember that they let one get away against the Leafs earlier this season. I'm not going to get much more into it. Hurricanes are one of the best road teams in the league, 18-9-3 this year. Matthews is still out. I'm getting minus 105 on the money line, Steele. I'm taking it all day. Carolina Hurricanes on the money line is my first bet of the night.
Hey, you can't go wrong with that pick, especially with everything, you know, the last couple of weeks, as actually from the beginning of the year with their goaltending issues, Austin Matthews being out of the lineup. I think the Carolina Hurricanes are the way to go on the money line as well. My first pick of the night is a Matt Duchene anytime goal scorer against the Philadelphia Flyers. He's just been red. He's just been absolutely hot the last 5-6 games. He's 7-point game streak, actually. Anyways, but he's been scoring at will. So Matt Duchene, anytime goal scorer against the Philadelphia Flyers. My second pick and my lock of the night is going to be the New York Rangers money line versus the New York Islanders. The Islanders have turned it around over the last couple of weeks, but the Rangers are just red hot as well. Igor Shesterkin being the best goalie. We've explained this so many times. I'm going with the Rangers on the money line versus the Islanders for my lock of the night.
Look, I've said it before and we'll say it again. This is a secondary Rangers podcast. Some reason we're always pumping their tires, but look, there's a lot to like about that team. And obviously having the best goalie in the business right now automatically puts your team up into the conversation where we have to talk about them all the time, Steele. It might sound a bit played out, but they are a good team. I'm not going there. I'm staying away from that game. Those inner city New York versus New York always scare me. I think you're on to something here. You're on the right path, but I'm staying away. It's a coin flip for me. Good luck, good sir. I have 2 player props to round out my picks, which include my lock of the night. I'll give you my lock of the night last, as always. I'm looking to a kid on the Montreal Canadiens who has refound his swagger in Cole Caufield.
Yeah.
I like his game is back to where he's a confident, young, almost cocky goal scorer who has that flair. And now with Martin St. Louis, I'll throw this up. The former 15th overall draft pick, in 15 games since Marty St. Louis has been behind the bench, Caufield has gone off for 10 goals and 9 assists, 2 power play goals, 2 game winners, and now up to almost 19 minutes a night. He had 2 goals in his last game against a red-hot Arizona team. I love this spot at home against the Dallas Stars, who we know are not playing great hockey right now. Cole Caufield, anytime goal scorer. I love the odd. I love the spot. And this kid is red hot. Wow, that was a lot of rhymes. Let's go.
Hey, we're taking the hot hands right now, Matt Duchene and Cole Caufield for anytime goals Thursday night. So keep an eye out for those players. Keep an eye out for those games. They've been red hot. So you might want to sprinkle some money down on Duchene and Cole Caufield. My last pick of the night is the Oilers on the puck line versus the Buffalo Sabres. And I know the Sabres absolutely destroyed the Maple Leafs in the Heritage Classic 5-2. It wasn't really a good game on their part. offensively, and I just think the matchup going into this game, the Oilers tend to play a lot better against the Sabres than the Leafs do. And there's just so much speed and so much quickness that they have up front that I think Connor McDavid and Draisaitl can, this is one of the games that they can just really take over themselves and do it all by themselves. You know, toss Evander Kane in there, Kyler Yamamoto, Derek Ryan, who we've talked about. I'm taking the Oilers on the puck line for my last pick. But again, my lock of the night is the Rangers on the money line.
Yeah, another one of those games that I actually wanted to bet the Oilers as well. And then just looking at the Sabres over the past couple of games playing well, but we know they don't travel well, as you know, as one of the points against them not being a good road team. I wish you nothing but the best. I'm staying away from that game as well, but I know you're going to like my lock of the night, and he is just too red hot on the Nashville Predators, who are, like you said, scoring at will and feeling it. 17 goals and 52 assists this season for Roman Yossi. I mentioned his hot streak of games, 7-game point streak, 3 goals and 13 assists over that span, including 7 assists over his last 4 games. Roman Yossi anytime assist almost feels too good to be true, Steele.
Yeah.
But I can't not go that way, especially against, I know we talked Carter Hart longevity down the road, fantasy value, but still this season, not a good team. Great spot for the Nashville Predators, only 2 points back of the Blues. Big spot for them to get these 2 points. You can almost expect a big game from Yossi, Duchene, and those studs. Let's get it by association, pal. You win, I win, I think. You know what I'm saying? I'm loving this angle, so I might sprinkle a bit on all of them. Roman Yossi, anytime assist, my lock of the night.
All right, Flip's lock of the night, anytime assist from Roman Yossi. I actually might just change my lock of the night to anytime goal scorer Matt Duchene, just so we can, you know,
let's do it.
Who knows what happened, but
let's
all
get
right,
weird.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. My lock of the night is Matt Duchene, anytime goal scorer. Flip's lock of the night, anytime assist from Roman Yossi. Check out that Philadelphia Flyer Nashville Predators matchup Thursday night. You want to keep your eyes out for it. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. If you want more gambling advice on what you should pick, but for not just hockey, make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q with insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all podcast platforms, just like this podcast right here. So make sure you go subscribe. Make sure you go follow the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And once you do, you'll get the latest episodes of the podcast every single morning, Monday to Friday, 7 o'clock Eastern time, Monday to Friday. You don't want to miss out on it. So make sure you subscribe. Flip and I appreciate all the love and support out there. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.